Hi folks, hope everybody's okay. This is Jason, and we are going to be thinking about archaeology and the Bible and the New Testament. If you want to read an article, you can read Archaeology and the Historical Reliability of the New Testament. And we're just going to read a quote by Miller Burrows, Professor of Archaeology, Yale University. He writes, "On the whole, archaeological work has unquestionably strengthened confidence in the reliability of the scriptural record. More than one archaeologist has found his respect for the Bible increased by the experience of excavation in Palestine. Archaeology has in many cases refuted the views of modern critics." Miller Burrows, Professor of Archaeology, Yale University. Archaeologist William F. Albright observes, "The excessive skepticism shown towards the Bible by important historical schools of the 18th and 19th centuries, certain phases of which still appear periodically, has been progressively discredited. Discovery after discovery has established the accuracy of innumerable details and has brought increased recognition to the value of the Bible as a source of history." Craig L. Blomberg, one of the great writers on the Gospels, says, quote, "Archaeology can demonstrate that the place mentioned in the Gospels really existed and that customs, living conditions, topography, household and workplaces, furniture and tools, roads, coins, buildings and numerous other stage props correspond to how the Gospels describe them. It can show that the names of the certain characters in the Gospels are accurate. When we find in scriptural references to them elsewhere, events and teachings ascribed to Jesus become legible and therefore plausible when read against everything we know about life in Palestine in the first third of the first century." Some of the archaeological evidences that have confirmed the New Testament. In 1968, you have Johann ben Hagalgo had a 7-inch nail driven through his feet. This was found in 1968 and relates to the first century. It was a first century find of first century Judaism, and backs up John chapter 19, 31 and 32 about the way crucifixion was done. You have the Nazareth Decree, which is a marble slab which was unearthed in Nazareth in 1878, and it was issued about AD 41 by the Emperor Claudius to the effect that no graves should be disturbed or bodies extracted, with offenders sentenced to death. The reason why probably that was given is because of the rumors going around that Jesus had risen from the dead. Some have said that there was no leprosy in the first century. One writer and Craig E. Evans, Jesus and the World, says, "However, thanks to archaeology, there is now dramatic evidence of its existence in the early first century. Scientific testing of the burial shroud in the so-called Shroud Tomb has confirmed the presence of leprosy. Accelerator mass spectrometry (AMS) radiocarbon dating confirmed the first century date of both shroud and skeletal remains. DNA testing confirmed that the man wrapped in the shroud was related to other members whose skeletal remains were recovered in the tomb. This DNA testing also revealed that the man has suffered from leprosy." In the 1980s, a draft exposed a well-preserved first-century fishing boat measuring 26.5 feet long, 7.5 feet wide, 4.5 feet high, in the mud of the Sea of Galilee. The writer, Ralph O. Muncaster, writes this: under the direction of Israeli Antiquities Authority, archaeologists began a race against time to carefully extract the boat from the mud before the waters returned. Eventually, it was placed in a climate-controlled environment to protect it from aging. Pots and lamps found inside the boat dated to the 1st century. Carbon-14 testing further confirmed the dating. The design of the boat was typical of fishing boats during that period on the Sea of Galilee. At the back of the boat was a red section like the one where Jesus could have been sleeping, as indicated in the Gospel accounts. The boat could accommodate 15 people, including crew. This archaeological discovery confirms the description given in the Bible. The Polytarch inscription in the Gospel, in Luke, Acts chapter 17, 1-10, we read, when Paul and his companions had passed through Philippus and Apollonia, they came to Thessalonica. Paul went into the synagogue, and on 3 Sabbath days he reasoned with them from the Scriptures, explaining and proving that the Messiah had to suffer and rise from the dead. This Jesus I am proclaiming to you is the Messiah, he said. Some of the Jews were persuaded and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks, and not a few prominent women. But other Jews were jealous, so they rounded up on some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason and some other believers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decree, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." When they heard this, the crowd and the city officials were thrown into turmoil. Then they made Jason and others post bond and let them go. In the article, Peter S. Williams, Archaeology and the Historical Reliability of the New Testament, he writes, the Greek term translated here as city officials is polytarch. Since the term doesn't appear in classical literature, critics of the New Testament assert for many years that Luke was mistaken in his use of the term polytarchs for the officials of Thessalonica. However, an inscription using this term was found on a 1st century AD art torn down in 1867. As T.C. Mitchell describes it, the inscription lists the officials of the town, 2nd century AD, beginning with 6 polytarchs and naming the city treasurer and the Gymnasiarch, director of higher education. The inscription begins Polytarch Conton, while the following were acting as polytarchs. It is worth noting that 2 of the names that appear in this inscription, Sospatros and Lucius, were borne by 2 men, Berea, whom Paul describes as kinsmen, but in this context perhaps Jewish Christians, Romans 16:21. Equally, the name Secundus and Gaius were borne by a man from Thessalonica, Acts 24, and Macedonia, Acts 19:29, who were travelling companions of Paul. These were not, of course, the same men, but simply demonstrate the currency of the personal names in the area in the century following the time of Paul. So it just gives you a little bit of information there, and so I just quoted the quotes, but if you want to read the full article, Archaeology and the Historical Reliability of the New Testament, Peter S. Williams. Is assistant professor in communication and worldviews, and I just quoted a few quotes from various works, scholars, but if you want to read his article, and it will give you about 76 references that you can go and look up as well. So hope that's a blessing to you, and take care. God bless.